September 19, 1944, near Arracourt, France. 630 hours. Oberleutnant Heinrich König stood in the commander's cupola of his Panzer 66 Tiger, scanning the fog-shrouded fields through his binoculars. The morning mist was thick, visibility limited to perhaps 200 meters. But König was confident. His Tiger tank weighed 56 tons, mounted an 80 mm gun that could penetrate any Allied tank at 2,000 meters, and had frontal armor 100 millimeters thick. The Americans approaching his position had Sherman tanks, thin-skinned, undergunned machines that German tankers called Ronsons because they lit up like cigarette lighters when hit. König had destroyed 4 Shermans in the past week. His gunner, Feldwebel Otto Braun, had 11 confirmed kills. They were veterans of the Eastern Front, survivors of Kursk and Ukraine. American tanks didn't frighten them. Herr Oberleutnant, Braun called from the gunner's position. Movement, 500 meters, multiple targets. Through the fog, König saw them. German tanks, advancing in line formation. He counted 5, no 6, perhaps 8. They looked small, vulnerable, almost pitiful. König smiled. This would be quick. All Tigers open fire when ready, he transmitted to his company. Let's show the Americans what real tanks can do. What König didn't know, what he couldn't possibly have known, was that he was witnessing the fundamental equation that would determine the outcome of World War II. The Germans had built better individual tanks, but the Americans had built enough tanks to make better irrelevant. This is the story of how American industrial might, embodied in 49,234 Sherman tanks, defeated German technical superiority. This is the story of the Battle of Arracourt, where 5 American Shermans defeated an entire company of German Panthers. This is the story of how quantity became a quality all its own. The mathematics were simple, brutal, and ultimately decisive. Germany produced 1,347 Tiger tanks during World War II. America produced 49,234 Shermans. For every Tiger, there were 36 Shermans. The Germans could win every engagement and still lose the war. They just didn't understand that yet. June 1942, the Aberdeen Proving Ground, Maryland. The M4 Sherman medium tank had been in production for exactly 3 months. American military planners were nervous. Reports from North Africa suggested that German tanks significantly outmatched anything the British had. The Panzer IV, with its long 75mm gun, could destroy British tanks at ranges where British guns couldn't penetrate German armor. The Sherman's designers had prioritized different qualities than German engineers. Where German tanks emphasized armor and firepower, the Sherman was designed around a revolutionary concept: mass production combined with mechanical reliability. The Sherman's specifications seemed modest. It weighed 30 tons, half the weight of the future Tiger. Its 75mm M3 gun had good high-explosive performance but mediocre anti-tank capability. Its armor was adequate but not exceptional. 50mm on the front glacis, 38mm on the sides. But the Sherman had advantages that wouldn't become apparent until combat. It was reliable, easy to maintain, simple to produce, and could be manufactured in overwhelming numbers. The Detroit Tank Arsenal, built specifically to produce Shermans, was designed by Chrysler Corporation using automobile mass production techniques. The facility could produce 1 complete Sherman every hour at peak capacity. Every single hour, 24 hours per day, 7 days per week. German tank production, by contrast, was scattered across dozens of small workshops, using skilled craftsmen building tanks almost by hand. The Tiger tank required 300,000 man-hours to construct. A Sherman required 10,000 man-hours. This difference would prove decisive. August 1942, Schweinfurt, Germany. Ferdinand Porsche presented his design for the heavy tank that would become the Tiger to Adolf Hitler and senior Wehrmacht leadership. Hitler was immediately impressed. The Tiger mounted the legendary 80mm KWK-36 gun, the same weapon that had destroyed British tanks in North Africa and Soviet tanks at Kursk. It had armor up to 120mm thick on the front. It weighed 56 tons and required an 800-horsepower Maybach engine just to move. "This," Hitler declared, "is the tank that will win the war." Production began immediately, but from the start, problems emerged. The Tiger was mechanically complex, requiring skilled assembly. Its overlapping road wheel suspension, while providing excellent cross-country performance, was prone to jamming with mud and ice. Its transmission frequently failed under the stress of moving such massive weight. More critically, German industry simply couldn't produce them quickly enough. In all of 1942, only 78 Tigers were completed. In 1943, production peaked at 649 units. By comparison, American factories produced 21,145 Shermans in 1943 alone. The Germans were building technically superior tanks. The Americans were building enough tanks to equip entire armies. November 1942, Tunisia, North Africa. The first combat encounter between American Shermans and German armor occurred near Kasserine Pass. It did not go well for the Americans. German Panzer IVs and a handful of Tigers smashed through American defensive positions. Shermans were knocked out at ranges where their own guns couldn't penetrate German armor. American tankers, many in combat for the first time, were shaken by the ferocity of the German attack and the apparent invincibility of German tanks. Oberst Hans-Georg Hildebrand, commanding the 7th Panzer Regiment, wrote in his after-action report, "American tanks are inferior to our Panzer IVs in every respect. Their 75mm gun cannot penetrate our frontal armor at combat ranges. Their armor is thin and vulnerable. We destroyed 12 enemy tanks with no losses. The American tankers lack experience and appear poorly trained." German confidence was understandable, but they were drawing the wrong conclusions from their victory. The Americans weren't trying to build a tank that could defeat a German tank in single combat. They were building a tank that could be produced in such overwhelming numbers that individual superiority became irrelevant. Lieutenant Colonel Creighton Abrams, commanding the 37th Tank Battalion, understood this instinctively. After Kasserine, he gathered his company commanders and spoke bluntly. "Gentlemen, the Germans have better tanks. Accept that. But we have more tanks. We can afford to lose 2 Shermans for every German tank we destroy. They can't afford to lose any. So here's the doctrine. Never fight fair. Always bring more tanks than they have. Flank them, surround them, overwhelm them. We win by mathematics, not by heroics." This doctrine, using numerical superiority to offset technical inferiority, would become the American way of tank warfare. June 1944, Normandy, France. The first Tiger encountered by American forces in Normandy demonstrated exactly what German technical superiority meant in practice. On June 13th, a single Tiger from Schwer SS Panzerabteilung 101, commanded by SS Oberscharführer Michael Wittmann, ambushed a column of British tanks and vehicles near Villers-Bocage. In 15 minutes, Wittmann's Tiger destroyed 14 tanks, 15 personnel carriers, and 2 anti-tank guns before withdrawing. The after-action reports from British survivors were sobering. One tank commander reported, "We fired 3 rounds directly into the Tiger's frontal armor at 400 yards. All 3 bounced off. The Tiger fired once. Our tank exploded. The crew didn't survive." German tank commanders began to believe they were invincible. Statistically, they had reason for confidence. In Normandy, German tank crews achieved kill ratios of 3-1, 4-1, sometimes higher. A well-positioned Panther or Tiger could destroy multiple Shermans before being knocked out. But those statistics hid a fatal flaw in German thinking. They were winning tactical engagements while losing the strategic war of attrition. July 1944, Detroit, Michigan. While German tankers celebrated their tactical successes in Normandy, American factories were producing Shermans at a rate that would have seemed impossible to German planners. The Detroit tank arsenal alone completed 22,234 Shermans during the war. The Fisher tank arsenal produced 11,283. The Federal Machine and Welder Company built 540. The Pullman Standard Company, better known for building railroad cars, produced 689. In total, 11 different facilities produced Shermans using standardized components that could be assembled by workers with minimal training. By mid-1944, American production capacity was so overwhelming that surplus Shermans were being supplied to British, Canadian, Polish, Free French and Soviet forces under Lend-Lease. Over 4,000 Shermans went to Soviet forces alone, supplementing their T-34 production. The German economy, by contrast, was straining under the demands of a multi-front war. Strategic bombing was disrupting production. Labor shortages meant skilled workers couldn't be spared for tank production. Material shortages, particularly in rare metals needed for armor and engines, limited output. In July 1944, German industry produced 342 Panther tanks, their second-best medium tank after the Tiger. That same month, American factories produced 1,614 Shermans. The mathematical advantage was overwhelming, but it needed to be translated into battlefield success. September 18, 1944, near Arracourt, France. Evening. General George S. Patton's Third Army had advanced 400 miles across France in just over a month, liberating Paris and driving toward the German border. But logistics were stretched thin. Fuel supplies were running low and the advance was slowing. German commanders saw an opportunity. General der Panzertruppen Hasso von Manteuffel, commanding the 5th Panzer Army, assembled a counter-offensive force near Arracourt. His plan was to smash through American positions, cut their supply lines, and force Patton to halt his advance. Manteuffel's force included the 113th Panzer Brigade, equipped with brand-new Panther tanks fresh from German factories. The Panther was arguably the best medium tank of World War II, well-armored, fast, mounting a devastating 75mm KWK-42 gun that could penetrate any Allied tank at extreme ranges. Facing them was Combat Command A of the U.S. 4th Armored Division, commanded by Lieutenant Colonel Creighton Abrams. His force consisted primarily of M4 Sherman tanks with 75mm guns, exactly the tanks German intelligence had dismissed as inferior. The stage was set for the largest tank battle American forces would fight until the Battle of the Bulge, 3 months late. September 19, 1944, 700 hours, the fog lifts. Oberleutnant Koenig's Tiger fired first at 400 meters. The 80mm armor-piercing round struck the lead American Sherman directly on the frontal glacis. The Sherman exploded, its ammunition detonating in a fireball visible through the thinning fog. Koenig's crew cheered. His loader rammed another round into the breach. The gunner traversed the turret, acquired a second target, fired. Another Sherman destroyed. Within 5 minutes, Koenig's company of 5 Tigers had destroyed 8 American tanks. The mathematics seemed to confirm every assumption about German tank superiority. But then something happened that Koenig hadn't anticipated. More Shermans appeared. Not 5 or 6, but dozens. They weren't advancing in neat lines anymore. They were maneuvering, using terrain, flanking. Koenig's Tiger destroyed a 9th Sherman at 600 meters, then a 10th at 300 meters. But for every Sherman his Tiger destroyed, 2 more appeared from different directions. Captain James Leach, commanding Company C of the 37th Tank Battalion, had been trained according to Abrams's doctrine. Never fight fair, always bring overwhelming numbers, use mobility to compensate for armor. His 15 Shermans divided into 3 groups. 5 Shermans engaged the Tigers frontally, accepting losses to fix them in position. 5 more maneuvered left through a small wood, moving to attack the Tigers' weaker side armor. 5 more circled right, looking for shots at the Tiger's vulnerable rear armor. Koenig destroyed 2 more Shermans from the flanking force, but then his gunner shouted, "Side armor hit, traversing mechanism damaged." A Sherman had gotten within 400 meters of the Tiger's side, where armor was only 80 millimeters thick instead of the 100 millimeter frontal plate. The Sherman's 75 millimeter gun, inadequate against frontal armor, could penetrate side armor at that range. Koenig's Tiger was still mobile, but couldn't traverse its turret effectively. He ordered his driver to turn the entire tank to bring the gun to bear. As the Tiger's massive hull began pivoting, another Sherman fired from a different angle. This round struck the Tiger's track, immobilizing it. Koenig and his crew abandoned the Tiger, escaping on foot as American tanks surrounded their disabled vehicle. By 0900 hours, the engagement was over. The German force had destroyed 12 American Sherman tanks, but they had lost 11 of their own panzers, including 3 Tigers and 8 Panthers. More critically, within 6 hours, American replacement tanks arrived from reserve positions. The 12 lost Shermans were replaced by 15 fresh tanks from depot stocks. American maintenance crews recovered 5 damaged Shermans from the battlefield and returned them to service within 24 hours. The German losses were permanent. There were no reserve panzers, no replacement Tigers waiting in depot. Each loss was irreplaceable. This was the equation that would determine the war's outcome. September 20th to 22, 1944. The battle continues. Over the next 3 days, German forces committed more armor to the Arracourt offensive. The 111th Panzer Brigade joined the battle, adding 88 tanks to the German assault. The Americans responded by committing additional Sherman battalions from other divisions. The fighting was intense. German tankers fought skillfully, using their superior guns and armor to advantage whenever possible. But American numerical superiority proved overwhelming. Every time German commanders concentrated their forces for a decisive blow, American commanders responded by bringing more tanks to that sector. When Germans achieved local superiority in one area, Americans simply avoided that sector and attacked elsewhere. By September 22nd, when the battle ended, German forces had lost 86 tanks destroyed or disabled. American forces lost 25 Shermans destroyed, with another 20 damaged but recovered and repaired. The kill ratio favored the Germans. They destroyed or disabled 45 American tanks while losing 86 of their own. By the mathematics of individual combat, the Germans had performed well, but those 86 German tanks were irreplaceable. The 45 American tanks were replaced within a week. General Lieutenant Smilo von Luttwitz, commanding the 47th Panzer Corps at Arracourt, wrote in his after-action report, "Our tanks are superior. Our crews are more experienced. Our tactics are sound. But the Americans have inexhaustible reserves. We destroy 5 enemy tanks, and 10 more appear the next day. We lose 1 panzer, and it is gone forever." This is a war of mathematics, and the mathematics favor the enemy. This assessment from a veteran panzer commander captured the fundamental reality of tank warfare in 1944, October 1944, the mathematics of production. The Battle of Arracourt demonstrated in miniature what was happening across all fronts. German tactical superiority being overwhelmed by Allied material superiority. By October 1944, Germany had produced 347 Tiger Fund heavy tanks. Production ended August 1944. 489 Tiger II heavy tanks. Production ongoing. 6,042 Panther medium tanks. Production ongoing. Total 7,878 heavy and medium tanks. By October 1944, the United States had produced 49,234 M4. Sherman medium tanks. Production ongoing, 2,507 Men-26 Pershing heavy tanks beginning production. The British had received 17,184 Shermans under Lend-Lease. The Soviets had received 4,902 Shermans. Canada produced an additional 188 Grizzly tanks, essentially Canadian-built Shermans. The mathematical advantage was approximately 9-1 in total numbers, but the real advantage was even greater than raw numbers suggested. American tanks could be repaired quickly. Standardized components meant any Sherman could be repaired with parts from any other Sherman. Welded hulls could be patched, engines could be swapped in hours, transmissions were modular and easily replaced. German tanks were mechanically complex. Tigers required specialized tools and trained mechanics. Parts weren't standardized. A component from one Tiger might not fit another due to hand fitting during assembly. Repairs took days or weeks. More critically, American logistics could deliver spare parts to the front lines. Germany's logistics system was collapsing under Allied bombing and partisan attacks. Even when spare parts existed, getting them to the front was often impossible. A damaged Sherman had a 60% chance of being repaired and returned to service. A damaged Tiger had perhaps a 20% chance. The war was being won not by better tanks, but by the industrial capacity to produce, maintain, and replace tanks faster than they could be destroyed. November 1944. The German perspective shifts. As autumn turned to winter and Germany prepared for its final offensive in the Ardennes, German tank commanders were beginning to understand the hopelessness of their situation. Hauptmann Gustav Knittel, commanding a company of Panthers in the 1st SS Panzer Division, wrote in his diary, "We destroyed 4 American tanks today. Good shooting, long range, perfect tactics. By evening, 8 more American tanks had replaced them. This is how we lose the war. Not through inferior soldiers or poor tactics, but through simple arithmetic. They can replace losses. We cannot." German intelligence estimates in November 1944 calculated that American forces had approximately 20,000 tanks in Europe, with production continuing at over 1,500 per month. German forces in the West had perhaps 1 to 800 operational tanks, with monthly production of all types not exceeding 800 vehicles. Even more concerning, German tank quality was declining. Critical shortages of molybdenum and tungsten meant armor quality was degrading. Late war Panthers had inferior armor to early war models. Engines were less reliable due to material substitutions. Crews were less experienced due to mounting losses. American Sherman quality, by contrast, was improving. The Sherman M4A3E8, nicknamed the Easy 8, featured improved suspension, a high-velocity 76mm gun, and better armor arrangement. It still couldn't match a Panther in direct combat, but it was closing the gap while being produced in overwhelming numbers. December 16, 1944. The Battle of the Bulge begins. Germany's final offensive in the West began with over 400,000 men and 1,400 tanks and assault guns. The largest German armored force assembled since Kursk. Hitler had scraped together every available panzer, pulling units from other fronts, to create a force capable of one last, decisive blow. The offensive initially succeeded through surprise and overwhelming local superiority. American units were overrun, supply depots captured, and panic spread through Allied rear areas. But within 48 hours, American logistics swung into action. Entire armored divisions were rerouted. Replacement tanks rolled forward from depot stocks. The 2nd and 3rd Armored Divisions, equipped with over 500 Shermans between them, deployed to block the German advance. German forces, by contrast, were quickly running out of fuel. Many panzers were abandoned not because they were damaged, but because there was no fuel to run them. The offensive that began with 1,400 German tanks had only 800 operational within a week. Half lost to fuel shortages rather than combat. By Christmas 1944, the offensive had stalled. German forces began withdrawing, leaving behind over 600 tanks destroyed, abandoned, or immobilized. American forces lost approximately 730 tanks during the Bulge, but replaced them all within 3 weeks. The battle demonstrated the final fundamental truth about tank warfare in World War II. Operational tempo was determined not by the quality of individual tanks, but by the logistics system that kept them fueled, supplied, and maintained. Germany had built technically superior tanks, but they couldn't fuel them, couldn't replace them when lost, and couldn't maintain them in the field. The Americans could do all three. January 1945. Germany. As Allied forces crossed into Germany itself, the disparity between German and American tank forces became absolute. German factories were being bombed daily. What little production continued was disrupted by material shortages, labor shortages, and transportation chaos. In January 1945, Germany produced 156 Panthers and 79 Tiger IIs, barely enough to replace a week's losses. American production in January 1945, 1,243 Shermans plus 532 M26 Pershings, a new heavy tank that finally matched German armor in firepower and protection while maintaining American advantages in reliability and production capacity. German tank units were increasingly equipped with a hodgepodge of captured vehicles, obsolete pre-war tanks, and whatever could be scraped together from repair depots. The vaunted panzer divisions existed mostly on paper. American armored divisions, by contrast, were at full strength. Each division had over 250 tanks, with replacement vehicles available from theater reserve stocks. When a tank was lost, it was replaced within 24-48 hours. Oberst Hans von Luck, commanding a panzer regiment in the 21st Panzer Division, described the situation in late January. "We face an enemy with unlimited resources. They lose 10 tanks, 20 more arrive. We lose one, it is gone forever. Our crews are exhausted. Our tanks are worn out. We have no spare parts, no fuel, no hope. This is not warfare. This is industrial slaughter." March 1945. The final accounting. By March 1945, organized German resistance in the West was collapsing. What remained of German armored forces was being systematically destroyed, not through superior tactics or technology, but through simple, overwhelming force. American forces encountered isolated Tiger and Panther tanks that were still formidable weapons in direct combat. But they were outnumbered 10-1, 21, sometimes 51. Even the best tank with the best crew couldn't survive those odds. The final statistics from the European theater of operations told the story. American Sherman production, 49,234 tanks. American Sherman losses in Europe, 7,466 destroyed beyond repair. Result, net gain of 41,168 tanks, with thousands more in reserve or used for training. German heavy and medium tank production, all types, 24,730 tanks. German tank losses on all fronts, 21,758 destroyed beyond repair. Result, near total depletion of armored forces. The kill ratio in tank versus tank combat slightly favored German tanks throughout the war. German tankers destroyed more enemy tanks per German tank lost than American tankers destroyed German tanks per American tank lost. But that ratio was irrelevant. The Americans could afford losses. The Germans couldn't. May 8, 1945. Victory in Europe. When Germany surrendered, approximately 15,000 operational Shermans remained in American service in Europe, with thousands more in depots and repair facilities. American tank forces were at their peak strength, fully supplied, with trained crews and functioning logistics. German tank forces had ceased to exist. The last Panthers and Tigers were abandoned for lack of fuel, captured by Allied forces, or destroyed by their own crews to prevent capture. Total operational German tanks at surrender, fewer than 100, scattered across the remnants of the Wehrmacht. The fundamental equation had proven decisive. The Germans had built better individual tanks. The Americans had built enough tanks to make better irrelevant. Post-war interrogation, September 1945. General Oberst Heinz Guderian, former chief of the German General Staff and father of the Blitzkrieg Doctrine, was interrogated by American intelligence officers in September 1945. Asked about the decisive factors in Germany's defeat, Guderian spoke at length about Allied air superiority, Soviet numerical superiority, and strategic mistakes by German leadership. But when asked specifically about tank warfare, his answer was remarkably candid. Your Sherman was not the best tank of the war. Technically, our Panthers and Tigers were superior in armor, firepower, and individual combat capability. But you understood something we didn't. Modern warfare is not decided by the quality of individual weapons, but by the industrial capacity to produce, supply, and maintain those weapons in overwhelming numbers. We built 1,347 Tigers. You built 49,234 Shermans. We celebrated when our Tigers destroyed 5 or 10 enemy tanks. You simply built more tanks. We focused on technical perfection. You focused on mass production and logistics. In a long war against an industrial power, mass production wins. Every time. We should have learned this from World War I. We didn't. You did. The Sherman didn't defeat the Tiger through superior technology. It defeated the Tiger by being there in overwhelming numbers, supported by functioning logistics with replacement vehicles always available. That is how wars are won. When the interrogator mentioned the Battle of Arracourt specifically, where 5 Shermans defeated an entire company of Panthers, Guderian smiled grimly. Yes, Arracourt. I read the reports. Our tankers claimed it as a victory because we achieved favorable kill ratios. But we lost 86 irreplaceable Panzers. You lost 45 tanks and replaced them within a week. Who won that battle? The side that could sustain losses. That was you, not us. The legacy. The Sherman tank remained in service with American forces through the Korean War. Many nations operated Shermans into the 1970s, a testament to its reliability and adaptability. Total production exceeded 50,000 vehicles when including all variants. The Tiger tank ended production in August 1944 after 1,347 units. Only 7 known complete Tigers survive today in museums and collections, but the real legacy wasn't the tanks themselves. It was the doctrine they represented. The Germans had pursued technical excellence, superior armor, superior guns, superior engineering. But excellence required time, skilled labor, and resources Germany didn't have. The Americans had pursued something different. Adequate capability combined with mass production, reliability, and logistics. The Sherman wasn't the best tank of World War II, but it was good enough, and there were enough of them, and they could be kept running under combat conditions. That combination proved decisive. In the decades after World War II, military analysts studied the Sherman versus Tiger question extensively. The consensus emerged that while the Tiger was technically superior in almost every measurable way, the Sherman was strategically superior because it could be produced, maintained, and deployed in overwhelming numbers. This lesson, that adequate technology deployed in overwhelming numbers beats superior technology produced in limited quantities, would influence military procurement for generations. It's why the Soviet Union mass-produced T-54-55 tanks, over 100,000 built, rather than pursuing limited numbers of technically superior vehicles. It's why the United States built 10,000 M1 Abrams tanks rather than 1,000 better but more expensive alternatives. Quantity has a quality all its own. The Sherman proved it. The Tiger's defeat demonstrated it. And 49,234 American tanks overwhelmed 1,347 German Tigers to win the war. Oberleutnant Koenig survived the war. In a 1977 interview, at age 56, he was asked about his experiences commanding a Tiger at Arracourt. Yes, "I destroyed 12 American tanks that day," he said. "My crew cheered. We felt invincible." And then 30 more Shermans arrived that afternoon, then 20 more the next day, then 15 more the day after that. We destroyed perhaps 20 American tanks in 3 days, and we lost everything. That's when I understood. The Americans weren't trying to build a better tank than the Tiger. They were building enough tanks that it didn't matter if ours was better. They could lose 3 Shermans for every Tiger and still win. We couldn't lose even one Tiger without it being a disaster. People ask me, was the Tiger the best tank of the war? Yes, individually it was, but the Sherman won the war. And in the end, that's all that matters.